Yo, what's up, everybody? All right, so I wanted to go over my Necromancer minion build. Now, it's not so much of a guide because I don't know if I've made the best choices. I don't think I made the worst choices. The build works and it feels good and it's fun for me. So I just wanted to go over my progress. Also, I'm excited because I finally got the ring that defines, I guess, any Necromancer minion build. There's one certain unique ring that you need to get, and I had gotten Death's Embrace, or Mother's Embrace, is that what it's called? Yeah, I'd gotten that like 4 times. So I just finished a Nightmare Dungeon, and I saw the little pop up at the end, and it had a unique ring. And I wasn't certain if it was unique because sometimes the color's a little weird, but I was pretty sure it was, and it did not look like Mother's Embrace. So I was really excited. I immediately came back to town. I hit level 80 as well, real quick in a Hell Tide. But I got my ring set up. I'm also excited because I got this fresh mint OTK hoodie in the mail yesterday, and this is not an ad. I just really like the hoodie. Great job, guys. All right, so let's get into the build. So it's a full minion necromancer build. I'll go over the abilities real quick. Yeah, this is probably really weird. It's gonna catch people off guard. I don't know. Maybe they'll like it. So I'm actually not using any skills for the most part. I do have decompose. I have 3 points put into that. We've got the you and your minions deal 10% increased damage to enemies who are being decomposed. Because it's all about the minions, baby. So we've got our 3 basic points put into that. Decompose also helps create corpses, which is they're always good to have around. Now moving on, we've got Blight. Also, only 3 points put into Blight. Blight, we're basically just applying shadow damage over time. There's some stats on gear. It's an annoying stat, but it's there, so we're making use of it. Where you deal additional damage to enemies who are taking shadow damage over time. So Blight is a darkness skill. That is our shadow damage over time. We've also got the upgrade where they take 15% increased damage to enemies, your minions deal 15% increased damage to enemies that are standing within Blight. So we've got the 10% bonus from Decompose. We've got 15% bonus from Blight. As you can see, they start to add up. So we're not really using Decompose and Blight for their base damage. We're just using them to apply damage increase. And then we've got every passive that relies on minions here. There's probably more ideal stuff. I can tweak it later and play around, but I wanted to make sure I stayed true to full minion build while I was going through and playing. And honestly, it wasn't problematic. It was a lot of fun. It worked for the most part. There's a few areas in the game where enemies do crush your minions a little too fast. There's something later in the tree that helps aid that. Sometimes there are a few enemies that bypass it, and I hope they fix that, but it's all in all, it's pretty good. So we've got that. That's extra corpse gen on a lucky hit there. That's a good time. We've got thorns. We have a lot of thorns in the build because your minions get 30% of a majority of your stats, including thorns. And then the defender skeletons and the one golem that I'm using actually get 50% of your thorns. Plus, you can add to that within some of your gear can get stats to thorns for your minions. That's not really ideal or great, though. I would avoid it, but it does help if you are trying to do like a full minion thorn build or something like that. Increased skeletal warrior damage and life, that is, absolutely necessary. We're going to take all those passives for all of our minions. They're absolutely necessary. Corpse gen generates essence. I don't really need that, but we want this one, Fueled by Death. You deal 9% increased damage for 6 seconds after consuming a corpse. That is also good. So we're going to be using our Shadow Priest as often as possible to be applying a damage buff to all of our minions with that. I think there's a Paragon tree as well that relies on consuming corpses and getting a damage bonus as well, which is something to think about later. So you're going to be doing a lot of corpse consuming, so you're definitely going to want that. Close enemies take 6% more damage from you, deal less damage to you. You're ideally going to be far because we're relying more on Death's Reach, but it's nice to have the 9% less damage to you from close enemies and an additional damage bonus if you do happen to be standing a little bit too close. Does soften the blow of not getting the full 16% here. And then we have Skeleton Mage Mastery, of course. Now this is the highlight skill of the build. It's the only skill we're actually really using, I'd say, on a major rotation. Like Blight, we are putting up, every so often. I usually use that mostly on bosses. I feel like I need the extra damage bonus more on large single target elites or bosses. But we throw some Blights and do Decompose as often as possible. But Corpse Tendril is the one we're really focused on because, it has a short cooldown. As the more levels you put into it, the lower its cooldown gets. That's why you want to put as many levels into this as possible, maybe get some levels into it on gear, if possible. That way you can get it down to a really, really short cooldown. Because Corpse Tendril is applying a stun as well as vulnerable for 3 seconds when you take the bonus to it here. So vulnerable is important in every build for every character. You need to have if not one, multiple ways to apply vulnerable. That way you can have it up almost all the time. That is the ideal situation there. But yeah, the reduced cooldown helps me keep up the stun, and the stun helps having enemies crowd controlled. And as you know, there's a lot of damage to stunned, damage to crowd controlled, damage to slow. Blight also applies slow to enemies. I don't know if I mentioned that, but that's important to remember that. This build is applying tons of crowd control, so you can easily take advantage of all those bullshit stats on gear. When a corpse is formed, your skills from your skills or your minions fortify for 6% bait life. Yeah, survivability is good. We don't have a lot of survivability on this build. Necromancer doesn't have a movement speed. It doesn't have a movement ability. I don't have movement speed on any of my gear just because I'm a lunatic, but most people will have movement speed on their gear. But even still, you need survivability. So yeah, we've got the Fortify there. That's going to help out a lot. Golem Mastery, of course. Army of the Dead is arguably the worst ultimate for Necromancer, but it's part of the minion fantasy here, the minion power fantasy for me. If your minions do die, it's able to summon all of them, so it's a great utility to have if you're, for some reason, in a bind. You don't have a lot of corpses around, you don't have any minions. Whenever you die and they spawn you, you don't have minions, and there's like never any corpses around. So I don't understand that, and I hope they fix that where you respawn with your minions. But in the short term, you can take Army of the Dead to get them back. It has the worst cooldown. The damage is spread out because the corpse skeletons go all over the place. They hit environment items. They run into the wall. Sometimes they all go into an enemy, but not necessarily. So I understand why the long cooldown and the low damage, because there's a lot of skeletons that hit over 7 seconds. It probably has the most damage potential if they all hit one enemy. But the problem is they don't do that. And they gave it a ridiculously long cooldown. It's not even this short. It's like 70 seconds or something, 60. I have 10%. I have like 20% cooldown reduction, so it's not even this low. But it's comically low compared to high compared to the others It just doesn't make any sense, and the damage is really low. Again, I think the damage was balanced properly here, but the actual ultimate's cooldown, it needs work. It's a trash ultimate, and you might want to consider a different one for your build if you don't really need the skeleton raising. I don't even think I need it, or this corpse shed, but I've had it for most of the game now, so I'm just keeping it. Kind of a stubborn mentality. All these passives here are great. Every 5 seconds, your skeleton priest heals will heal your skeletons for an additional 60% of their maximum life. I wish this procced instantly and every 5 seconds, and then cut off shorter. But it is what it is. Maybe that could be a little bit cheesy, but as is, there's a tendency where you'll see your minions are low and you'll hit the heal, and like you have to wait 5 seconds for the heal and they'll get killed, and it's like, well, that was kind of a waste, right? Now I just burdened that body that I could have revived that guy on a heal that didn't heal that guy. So it's a weird thing. I don't know if they can fix or balance that, but it's still great utility. I do. You're going to be spamming the priest anyway, possibly if you're not using corpse explosion for corpse consumption, which I am. So chances are you're going to be healing all the time anyway. And it's going to negate that weird scenario, but it's still a bit iffy, but a great skill. Your minions cannot lose more than 30% of the maximum life from a single damage. And absolutely important. You need this. This saves your minions from 95, maybe even 99% of the enemies in the game. The only issue are the massive trees, bears, and like the wolves. There's one dungeon in particular, and it's a necromancer aspect dungeon. I don't know if they did this by accident or on purpose, but my god, it was the worst experience of my life, because this thing does not matter, because those things cleave and do a dot. So they instantly like hit 30%, and they do either 4 hits and they'll just squash all your minions instantly. Or they do, like the bears, they do the huge cleave that does like a bleed. So the first 30% is lost in the cleave, and then the rest of the health is lost in the bleed. So it's not perfect, but it does help a lot. Maybe they can smooth out those particular enemies to not quite eat them through this, but it's manageable. It's definitely manageable. So it's a good buff, and you should take it. Your minions deal 30% increased damage while you're close to them. You may or may not be close to your minions, and it's a lot of weird micromanaging to pay attention to whether you're standing near them, but it's good to have in case you are, in my opinion. So take that, and then this one's a little iffy. Maybe you take this. I say you take at least one of this. But maybe 2. But since I'm full minion and I don't really care, I take all 3. The problem is you have to be healthy, and that requires you be above 80% health. And chances are sometimes you get hit to like 75, and it's like, I'm not going to heal or use a potion right now. So it'll drop down for like 5 seconds while my passive healing comes up. And then it's the same one with this. We're just going to skip ahead to Kalen's Edict here. This is probably not ideal, but full minion fantasy, so we had to take this one while you're healthy, or while you have not taken damage, rather. This one doesn't require you to be healthy, but just have taken damage. So it's a little bit better than the last one, but it's still inconsistent, because chances are you're taking a lot of little bits of damage here and there as you move around. So hopefully they can buff this one a little bit too, but maybe they don't have to. Maybe I just need to get better at not taking damage. You know what I mean? So that's the skill tree. I'm gonna take a quick jump into the gear here. Show you my attack power, armor, and life. One important thing to note is I get a buff from my Paragon board, where I get 15% bonus damage while not near a corpse. This does not show in town. If I run out of town here, real quick, you'll see that pops up to 8,658. If I go near some corpses, it drops back down. But I'm getting a 15% damage reduction instead, so that's pretty cool. I'll go back into the Paragon. We'll skip the gear for now. I don't want to... Gear is pretty straightforward. I can make another... I can make another video going over full gear stats if anybody wants me to do that. I'm sure other creators have done that, but I'll go over my gear real quick after the Paragon. So, I didn't know you could rotate these boards, actually, until now. So I just put these in the way they came. But it's pretty straightforward. Necros, you'll see a lot of Necros going the same way here in the path. You go to the right for damage. You're avoiding most of the survivability things. Not all of them, but most of, in favor of the damage nodes. I went with Revenge on my first glyph here to buff the overall output of both of these rare nodes here, as well as to buff my thorns. It's also pretty easy to get the 25 willpower out of this section here, because you got these 2 7-point willpowers there, and then there's one along the way up here. So I only really needed to grab two extra, 2 or 3 extra nodes to get that there. So that's pretty good. And we went up into, I forget what this one's called. It's this is the Minion related one. We've got Dead Razor up here in our glyph slot. Minion damage. Dead Razor, Paragon nodes in range, 76% bonus damage to their minion damage and damage reduction modifiers. So this is a perfect spot for this. We get bonus minion damage, we get bonus minion damage reduction, and that's great there. It costs 40 intelligence to open that up, which you get basically along the way, no problem at all. So it's super easy to get that, and pretty essential for a minion build. And then we've got Skeletal Mage damage, Cult Leader, Infused Warrior, Skeleton Warrior damage there, Puppeteer's overall minion damage. Then I spent a couple little extra nodes here to get 10% minion armor, because why not? And then we collect some of the extra Skeletal Mage damage and Skeletal Warrior damage along the sides there, of course. There are a couple extra points. Make sure you pick up as many of those extra blue nodes as you can, because even when they're flat stats, they're more than the usual, and they're going to help you reach the requirements for hitting some of these glyphs and getting the bonus on the glyph opened up. And then the third one here, we went for damage to injured enemies, damage to healthy enemies, more damage to injured enemies, and then we went with the control glyph here. I could get a little bit more out of the control glyph in the, I think, the first section there, but I think I get more benefit from the Revenge glyph being over there and getting the bonus to those rare nodes, whereas over here, so I get 90% damage to crowd controlled enemies, which is pretty good. Of course, it could be a tad higher, but I think that's solid. And then, of course, you only need 40 intelligence to unlock this, but you want to get as much intelligence as you can out of this. And the good thing to ones like this, when it's your main stat, a lot of your nodes will have your main stat in the rare node, so it might make it even easier to unlock and get more bonus out of them due to that. As you can see, I'm not hitting this dexterity requirement yet. That is a goal. We need to get our dexterity and willpower. I actually have plans to go up into this fourth node here. Instead of just cleaning up main stats, I don't know if people go into 4 nodes or stop at 3, but I like the idea of these attachment gates giving all stats basically 10 when you break through, because it gives 5 on each side. Yeah, I really like the idea, or maybe it only gives 5 total, and each side it's just a representation of like the attachment. I don't know. But yeah, it's just, I like the idea of getting all those stats easily for 1 point, And plus, there's more bonus to be had up there. I plan to go into Flesh Eater here. Flesh Eater has critical strike damage, damage to elites, some more intelligence and stuff like that, which is good. And consuming 5 corpses grants 40% increased damage for 6 seconds, which is the node that I mentioned. I'm going to be consuming a lot of corpses, so 40% increased damage, that's flat damage. And keep in mind, flat damage goes straight into your attack power, which increases everything exponentially. So that is an important stat to go and get, I think. And I already did the math at how many it's going to take to get. I can get that and then maybe even clean up some extra stats in there. I can get all the rare nodes I want in there. I can get that. So yeah, I have another glyph. I'm going to use Exploit, I think, for the final glyph, because I haven't used that, you'll notice. So yeah. And then the gear. I've got the actual stats. I'm not going to go over the actual stats on the top because they're all kind of straightforward for a lot of people. The important ones are like cooldown reduction on your helmet, on your amulet. You can get flat damage on your amulet, your main stat, your passive buffs, stuff like that. You know, boots, movement skill, you can get on your necklace as well. Maybe or movement speed, maybe you want that on your necklace and boots. I don't, because they kind of rolled really well. Otherwise, the boots, not so much. But I got 4 corpse tendril on there, and that's pretty cool. Intelligence, dodge chance against distance enemies, slow duration reduction, which is actually a great stat to have, in all honesty. So I'm not mad about that. Because being slow really sucks donkey dicks. But yeah, your armor, you can get damage, important damage, and damage reduction. A lot of people say put damage reduction exclusively on like your armor and legs, but you can get both. And it's important ones, like just raw damage reduction and raw damage, or summoning skill damage, physical damage, ultimate skill damage, as you can see that I have here. Your gloves are raw damage, you know, crit, lucky chance, crit chance against injured, attack speed, stuff like that. Great gloves there. But yeah, so ignoring all the stats, because you guys have probably seen guides about all the major stats on the gear. Let's go over the aspects. I've got 2 increased skeletal warriors, because 2 more skeletal warriors means 2 more warriors outputting damage that have thorns on them. 2 more minions alive at any given time for any of my buffs that need 7 or more minions. So yeah, that's nice to have. But I might get rid of the warriors in favor of something else if need be in the future. Skeleton mages +2, I think is you need this. The skeleton mages are so good; they do a lot of damage. You definitely want an extra 2 of those guys. I have increased damage to stunned enemies. I'm ignoring the first part of this buff here because my corpse tendril is stunning so often that that's all we're worried about, is the 40% damage to stunned enemies. And here, I'm really undecided on my pants. Your minions don't activate this. I hope they change it because, like, my minion's damage is my damage. It says when you deal any form of damage. My minion's damage is my damage, but it's not proccing this. I hope they change it, because even when it's maximum, it's really not that overpowered. But it's really hard to stack just by myself. And it's kind of shitty, but all the other ones are kind of shitty too. I think the best one is probably the damage reduction after using your base skill, because that's pretty easy to keep up all the time, and it's like 20% damage reduction. But I already changed this imprint, and I'm being a turd, so I don't want to change that. This buff is absolutely crucial to a minion build here. Every 10 seconds, your cold skeletal mages cast a blizzard that deals yada yada damage and chills enemies. So an additional crowd control, and a good chunk of damage out of your mages. And again, like I said, you want to have 2 extra mages at all times, because that's 2 more mages proccing this. You'll see a lot of little snowflakes coming down, chilling, freezing enemies, and that's great. We also, the cold mages, when they attack frozen enemies, they apply vulnerable. So that's an extra source of vulnerable there. On my weapon, I'm not sure if this is the ideal stat for my weapon. And I'm also using a shield because I'm a weirdo, but I like it, so I'm rolling with it. But yeah, I mean, you might want to do the two-hander route. But yeah, I have your skeletons gain increased damage 30% after 10 seconds, the longer they're alive. As long as you're keeping them alive, like when you're standing here especially, it's just racking up. So chances are, in between fights, it's racking up to the full amount. And as long as you're keeping the heal spam going, you should have no problem keeping that buff up. So it's a good buff. I'm just not sure if that's the best one for the weapon. Or if I should put that over here on the amulet. The amulet, but I actually think this is the perfect one for the amulet. 29% increased critical strike chance for 6 seconds when you cast Corpse Tendrils. I can cast Corpse Tendrils every 5 seconds. Well, 5.50 now, approximately. So I can keep up that crit chance all the time now, which is great. You deal 86% bonus crit strike damage to enemies damaged by Corpse Tendrils. So yeah, I think this is the best one for the amulet, which is absolutely massive. So you're definitely gonna want that in this build, or you know, a lot of Necro builds. I think that's a very good buff there. 20% increased critical strike chance against injured enemies. While you're healthy, you gain 40% increased crowd control duration. This one it's just more crit strike chance, especially on damages, enemies that are almost dead. You just want them to die faster anyway, so more crit chance against an enemy at any point is good. So we took that for that. And then the increased crowd control is good, because the longer they're stunned, the more damage we're doing to stunned enemies, slowed, crowd-controlled enemies as well. So the crowd control duration, while it doesn't directly increase damage, is increasing my damage because of all of the crowd control effects that are going on. Now this, the Ring of Mendelin, is the crowning jewel of any minion build, and it's amazing I made it this far without it. I was doing maybe 50, 75k damage max before getting this. Now I'll see 350k, maybe more, maybe less. I don't know. It's really hard with the minion build to see what's going on sometimes, and the stars have to align with this, the stun, the vulnerable, the crit, the injured enemies, whatever, to hit those super big numbers. But I have not seen 357,000 or anywhere near it on this build. I put this ring on, and that was the first number I saw, and I was like, okay, great. Great, we're done. We got the build. So this is the whole build, basically. This ring, whatever else you have with it, doesn't matter. No, you can make the build work without this ring. I forget what ring I was using before this. Oh, it's the attack speed. Your minions gain increased attack speed. That one's kind of a weird. And this ring has minion attack speed on it base. So I think overall they probably lose 20% attack speed not having that other buff. But they gain so much damage that it doesn't matter. And this, of course, I have to proc a lucky hit to gain. So you want to be, you know, throwing out your Decompose, your Blight, your Corpse Tendrils, just hoping you're getting lucky hits. You see them pretty often. You get lucky hit boost on your gloves, and you shouldn't have any problem there. Now, the shield, like I said, you might want to go with the two-handed weapon, but I like the shield. I see a lot of blocks. I see... you know, obviously I have a lot of damage. I'm not lacking on damage. So the 80% main hand weapon damage has gone a long way, especially on this very well-rolled sword. in giving me a lot of damage to make up for the fact that I'm not using a two-hand. So we're still probably at about 2,000 damage per second there on the weapon. I can actually check that in here, I believe, right? Weapon damage 2009. Yeah, exactly 2000. So yeah, that works out. And right here, increased another 20% increased crowd control duration. This one's kind of weird, but it's a shield, so it has to use an armor aspect. So I was having trouble trying to finding what to put here, because armor aspects don't generally give you increased damage unless there's some condition here, like you have 20% increased crowd control duration, which is giving me increased damage. In essence, while enemies are unstoppable, you gain 41% increased damage to them, up to 50%. I think I have a better one I can imprint on there, but the shield is kind of meh. Yeah, it's kind of meh. I don't really care for the fortified generation. The cooldown reduction is another essential spot for cooldown reduction. Your helmet, your amulet, and right here on your offhand are good for that. I think you can get it on some rings too, maybe. But I don't need that. On rings, I focus on lucky hit chance or crit chance, vulnerable damage, stuff like that. So I think that's about it. Video's probably getting long now, and I don't want it to get any longer. I can actually show off some gameplay in a later video, or I'll probably stream at some point on Twitch when I stop being a bitch. But if not, I'll just take a gameplay video and show that off if people want to see the actual damage numbers. But maybe I can get a quickie in right here with a public event. No? Okay. Alright. Of course. Thanks, Blizzard. Alright, but yeah, that's about it. Take it easy. Peace.